Few basic introductions. My name's Maddox Skrocke. I have done a few things in my career, but I am a full-time college student right now. I've been a business law teaching assistant. I have done a few things like investing work for people. I've done some bookkeeping. I've done a lot of jack-of-all-trades things. And while that doesn't cover all my bases, I think that I can talk about a lot of different things. Now, I'm here with two guests currently. We have Dr. Julian Dunraven, who is an international corporate attorney, and he can tell you a little bit about himself, and Father Andre, who has been a priest for the Vatican. And if I'm not mistaken, you have also been President Trump's personal priest at one point.
One of the advisors in spiritualities and work in the White House in an indirect way, called Faith Leaders for America. That's the White House Commission, yeah.
Nice. So is there anything else that you'd like to add, just like as a little bit of background for both of you?
Well, in addition to practicing international law, then yes, I also teach when I'm not practicing. I'm currently at Arapahoe Community College teaching law.
Awesome. So today, just wanted to touch on one thing. I think we've had one big issue that's come up, and I'm sure you've seen it both in academia settings and political settings, and maybe you've seen it too. I'm not sure on the side of Christianity how much it's been seen. It feels like information as a whole has become very abundant with the use of the internet, especially now. An attention span, the average is 2 seconds. And that being said, I mean, I don't know, how has that played in like your guys' careers?
Well, in law, that's definitely showing. We have many increased disciplinary hearings for lawyers that do not do the proper research, especially with the dawn of AI. They're using AI to draft their briefs, to draft their memos. They're not checking citations. They're not checking enough of the background to verify everything they're being told. Is that symptomatic of our lower attention span? Yeah. In long form, it's a little bit better from what I've seen. 2 seconds is even more terrifying than I've seen in long form. But yeah, it's about 7 seconds, so not terribly much longer in long form. But we are seeing that even in the practice of law. In students, you're absolutely right. I don't think any of them have the attention span for anything. And this last semester, I was told by many of the students that actually having to do actual research and work was something utterly foreign to them. And it was a brand new, novel experience. None of them did very well. And I think in the entire class, I think I had 40 people, 9 passed.
What is this concept of learning? You're saying I pay to learn?
No. These days, apparently, you pay money and expect a degree. Learning, discipline, rigor, it's
a bygone
bonus if you get it at all.
Yeah. And I mean, being a teaching assistant for you, I've seen a few come in, but it's very rare that you get somebody who's competent enough to actually like not have to be taught how to critically think.
Critical thinking is largely gone.
Yeah. There's been a huge decline in it as of recent. I mean, maybe you've guys seen digital overstimulation, like social media, these topics of like...
Social media, I think, is worse than drugs almost in how it fries people's brains and gives them, as you pointed out, a lower attention span. Nobody is willing to look into a situation anymore. No one is willing to analyze a situation. They don't even know how. One of the frequent questions I get in your class as well was, how do you even know what's true anymore? How do you know what's there? And academia, unfortunately, which is supposed to be helping people with that, does not. These days, you are more likely to get indoctrination from your professors than you are how to critically think. And the fact that the problem has gotten bad enough that I think now almost every major university has a critical thinking requirement makes me just furious, as that should be characteristic of every single class a university offers. It should not necessarily have to be a requirement. The fact that it is simply testifies to how poor a job we are doing in academia.
I guess, like, internationally speaking, though, is this, like, more of an Americanized issue, or is it worldwide? Like, I want to hear from both of you on that, because you guys have traveled around the world. I've been to one place out of the United States, and most Americans, I feel like, don't really see that culture past places they think are fun to go.
Are we talking about information in general, like as a concept, as a...
Lack of attention.
lack of attention.
pretty much how attention has replaced information as in forms of scarcity. Like information has now become abundant and attention has become scarce.
Well,
when it used to be vice versa.
in general, in its most simplistic form, informare is from formation. Is like basically you are in, first of all, a conditional setting, not a natural setting, and you are being fed formation. Formation meaning that's going to affect your character, that's going to affect your brain thinking, that's going to affect your principle of a speech and the form of a speech and the content of the speech, so you can act in a certain way. So information in general is by itself is a discipline that is to be given in a setting that is conditioned, not in a setting that is natural. Natural will be an observation. Natural will be a simple observation that comes through the senses. Information is actually something that comes with the brain of a human being. And at the same time, of course, we both spoke about the critical thinking versus the other theories that they try to use on human beings as a test. And with that, we always believe in our faith in God and in the Holy Bible and in our teaching in the church that a human being always must subject everything to conscience. So next to the critical thinking, you have to also use your conscience, because knowledge is what is being fed through information. And when you feed knowledge to human beings, and of course in this case, that would be a universal issue or a universal principle or universal case that applies in every part of the world. Knowledge could feed information that is factual, knowledge that feed information that could be analytical, knowledge that could feed information that is misinformation or disinformation. And here we go into more complex realities of a political world, propaganda, media. In today's world, information has grown so much out of the ordinary that we can no longer store it in us, and it doesn't form us only as human beings, but actually it goes to artificial intelligences. It goes to tools such as computers, such as the internet, such as the servers, where you store things in a virtual way. So short and sweet, today information is no longer a characteristic of the biological being only. So it's biological and it's technological at the same time, and that's something we did not have, not even 30 years ago, if we were to think about it. And it is an international situation.
Pretty much, just like as a brief summary, so I know I understand what you're saying. Not only is it impacted by like digital media of like what information we're receiving, but furthermore, the person's brain behind receiving the information. That could go down to external influences of how they grew up and how they perceived learning. It could go into multiple different factors of pretty much how it affected their brain, and now how does that brain receive information
and processes it.
Can they see misinformation when it comes across their screen? Can they see what they're reading for more than just words on a screen?
Even that term is rather loaded. Misinformation. What is that exactly? For me, it's much simpler to say, can you say what you are seeing is accurate or not? Misinformation tends to have the taint of groupthink around it. Are you saying not only what is necessarily true, but what is accepted in the wider community?
Sure, like Gustave Le Bon's The Crowd. Kind of like how when people get into large groups, right, like a rally or any political front, I think is a really good example. Any information that is sound or like logically sound that interferes with any of their thought process, they just see as complete misinformation. Like one big thing was President Trump went down to Mexico, and was it Maduro? Was that his name?
Maduro in Venezuela.
So, yeah, he went down there, and what ended up happening is I saw a few videos on this. People would go to these rallies that are saying, we stand with the people of Venezuela. But you go to the other side of media, where, like, Venezuelan people are on Instagram, and they're cheering. They're cheering. But some Americans that just don't see that side of culture, or, as you said, this groupthink, they don't even process it. They see it as misinformation, even though those people live there.
Yes.
Well, I would say, in a simple form, a difference between misinformation and information goes to the core issue of formation. When you do formation, you are given form to the brain to think and to act in a certain way. So it affects thinking and it affects behavior. So misinformation in this case, it gives a disform. It actually misinform in order to give the wrong form to a human, which affects the truth, basically, which affects the reality of things. An example that you just gave, because we work in the Mission of Hope and Mercy. You know, I'm the founder of the Mission of Hope and Mercy, where I live my priestly ministry and my ministry full-time now in our community, called Apostolate of Our Lady of Hope, St. Rafka Mission of Hope and Mercy. It's a nonprofit here in the state of Colorado, and we take care of the persecuted Christians and issues such as sometimes illegal immigrations, persecution, discrimination, food needs, medical needs, educational needs for people. And we have an observatory for the persecuted Christians and religious freedom. So Venezuela has been actually on our radar for the longest time. In 2017, when I went to Rome and I met with Pope Francis, many of his collaborators were Venezuelans. And at that time, they actually asked for a special meeting with me, assuming that I was close to the White House and I was close to President Trump's team, and some perspective in the fields of religious freedom and the persecuted Christians. At the time, the Venezuelans reported horrific things that were happening in Venezuela against Christians, against Catholics, against human beings in Venezuela and in Cuba. For instance, I never knew until that time that actually the forces, including military forces that run Venezuela, were Cubans, were not Venezuelans. I never knew that the private properties of every rich family that had oil on their lands were completely confiscated, because we have a lot of...
Under Chavez.
Yes. Under Chavez. You know, we have a lot of Lebanese people actually who were born and raised in Venezuela who owned huge properties and they had oil in their fields. They were killed, they were put in jail, dossiers were formed against them, and then they were kicked out of the country. And many of them, actually, few of them live here in Denver, Colorado, that I came to meet. And the last point I want to make, the difference between misinformation and information in the context of the action that our U.S. government took in Venezuela, to your point, it was a historical need, persistently, the Venezuelan people were asking the United States government to pressure their own government in order to give them back their religious freedom, to give them back their property rights, and to run away the mobs that were running their streets, which were not Venezuelans. And I want to leave you with this reality. 5 million Venezuelans were kicked out of Venezuela, living across the borders. And I know priests, friends of mine, that we assisted, we work with in our Mission of Hope and Mercy. Their job was to smuggle medicine for their families across the borders, I believe, between Colombia and Venezuela.
Yeah.
Because they didn't have medicine.
Was this just happening to Christian Venezuelans targeting, was this religious targeting, or was this happening to both Christians and non-Christians?
I like to hear what Dr. Dunraven would respond to this, but in my opinion, there are two human wells like WELLS, like as in well to draw from. Let's say numbers count, right? And you're going to speak about stats in a little bit. In a world of religion, the stats of Christianity count. They mean something. If Christianity statistics go down in the world could be in trouble. The church could be in trouble. In a Christian world, the statistics for Christianity, you have about 1,450,000,000 Catholics, for instance. And this year, their numbers are actually going down a little bit, not going up. Out of that, about 40% to 44% of the human wells that gives Christian baptized children and baptized families to Christianity is all of Latin America. So I cannot not consider it a Christian problem, because if geopolitically speaking, the Catholic Church worldwide means something, it's a nation that is in all the nations. It's an empire that inherited the Roman Empire that is still very vivid, very alive. It's a reflection of the kingdom of heaven. It has assets, it has buildings, it has people, it affects the mind, it affects in universities, in schools, in hospitals, in social services, in humanitarian services, in worship services, and even in businesses, as a matter of fact. It's a huge enterprise, if I may call it. Latin America is the main well. 44% of Christian human beings are actually provided from Latin America. So yes, I think it is a Christian problem, and they were targeted by communist regimes since 1923, 24, 25, 26, with the Cristo Rey in Mexico, with the problem immediately after the Bolshevik Revolution. Is very strange how the Bolshevik Revolution affected actually Latin America directly from, Russia, from the former Soviet Union. 1917 in October, you had the Bolshevik Revolution, which killed in the world 60 to 62 million Christians, and then it moved immediately to Latin America, and you had the very first revolution, Cristo Rey, in 1926, I believe. You may want to check it out to double check. And hundreds of thousands of Christians were killed, churches were confiscated, and Mexico never recovered ever since. Then Cuba became communist, Venezuela became communist, and the communist regimes started taking over in Latin America.
Too,
Argentina
although it's
too.
now just recovering.
Thank you.
The only difference I see now is that when they were unable to destroy Christianity entirely, they decided to co-opt it with liberation theology.
Thank you.
But
That's very smart.
you're bringing in the communist views to the religious preaching, and trying to make people more and more dependent on the government, weaning them off of religion. And so, yeah, he's absolutely right that this is a Christian problem in South America, Latin America, and in Africa more than anywhere else. Going back to your international point, I think
I'd like for you to speak a little bit more about liberation theology, because a greater point you're bringing up as a form of misinformation, which actually takes over the Christian identity through, let's say, capitalism, and somehow economically and ideologically it affects the Christian behavior and the poverty and the distribution. Could you please elaborate on?
In the scholastic teaching of the Catholic Church, and this goes back to orthodoxy as well, Christianity has this long tradition of what is virtue and what is individual responsibility. And a lot of that went into the founding of this country. Although it wasn't specifically religious, many of our founders were deists, they had that sort of scholastic background of understanding virtue is individual, and individuals had to perform virtues. So if I, for instance, Father Andre mentioned his charity, Mission of Hope and Mercy, if I give to the Mission of Hope and Mercy, it's a virtuous act, yeah?
Yeah.
But if the state...
I think we can agree giving to charity is probably a virtuous act.
Right. But because what gives it that virtuous quality is because I'm taking that individual responsibility to make that charitable donation. Mm-hmm. If, on the other hand, the state comes in and says, well, Father Andre's Mission of Hope and Mercy is a very good thing. In fact, it's such a good thing that we'd like to take it over. And instead of you giving to it, we're going to tax everyone and force all kinds of information to it.
Yeah.
This is the information that sort of the communist take, the liberation theologists take, even the Pope has made the mistake of saying. But it's no longer charity at that point.
No, it
because
isn't, it's institutionalized.
It's institutionalized and it's legalized. And once the law says you have to do it, they're holding a gun to someone's head. Yeah. And it's no longer charity, it's compulsion and it's slavery.
I want to conclude.
Charity's like giving back. Sorry, charity's giving back on your own accord. But once it's like forced, how are you calling it a charity? That is just taxing.
I want to conclude his point to seal the deal and providing a clear definition for how communism and liberation theology basically work together. So communists who could not kill Christianity, this was the point of Dr. Dunraven, they decided to co-opt it. They created liberation theology. They told the Christians in Latin America, you're very poor, you are in need, you don't have enough medicine, you don't have enough food, you don't have enough human rights, your governments are corrupt, you're governed by, I do not know what forms of authoritarian regimes that were before communist Latin America and socialist regimes in Latin America. They said, we are the solution. So they Christianized communism in order to create a contamination in a Christian economical thought where you still believe basically in a form, even though still is not the best form that there is in the world. But economically speaking, the word is a capitalist word. And in its best form, a Christian giving should actually meet with capitalist values to a certain extent, regardless of the mistakes of capitalism.
But Yeah, and as you said, I think this is kind of like a nice tie back to how like groups form and how maybe that can interfere with that. Do you think how with echo chambers and like information, the information segregation like deepen off of these echo chambers that are built, and where it might cause conflict in these certain areas of?
Explain to me echo chambers to make sure I understand it.
So an echo chamber is, let's say I'm liberal or conservative, whatever it might be, whatever my political affiliation is, I only feed into information that boosts my opinion. I don't look at counter. The point is, it's like basically neglecting counterpoints or arguments. You don't look at anything that could be used against you. You only look at what benefits you.
Okay.
It pretty much is just
And it's the algorithm of social media right
Yeah.
now. It connects like with like constantly.
Yeah.
So that eventually you only hear reinforcement of your own viewpoint.
Yeah, and so that saying, it like creates this, it deepens the segregation of, it's that tribal identity of it's us versus them, we versus you, like me versus you. And I think like a big statistical point is how we don't have any moderates or anybody in the middle of the political spectrum anymore. I think it's a great example of that. But to your point, how do you like think these algorithms are designed for maximum engagement? Like, how do you think that plays into as a cause of digital or into the decline of critical thinking? How do you think it plays into that?
Well, when everyone agrees with you, yeah, you're very seldom looking for counter-arguments. And you asked earlier about the international view of media versus here in the United States. One of the nice things about some of the international world that has experienced some of what Father Andre has talked about is that they're used to oppressive governments. And so they're used to the fact that much of their state or much of the media that they get comes from the state. And they know that they're being lied to. So in Venezuela, in Africa, in the Middle East, there is that awareness that what is coming out of the mainstream media that they have is limited, and it's the state message. So there's some insurgency, let's say, in the social media. Here in the United States, we're not used to that. Despite a long tradition of yellow journalism, there is not that same suspicion.
This is America, everything's truthful, obviously.
Right. Our corporate media may not be state-owned, but it certainly runs on a sort of groupthink that I talked about earlier. You give them the same message overwhelmingly through the media. I would say America is one of the most propagandized populations on the face of the earth. They just don't seem to know it as well as some of the other countries. And so while there is a bit of resistance in some, say, Latin American countries, African countries, you don't see that as much in the United States. You also don't see it as much in Europe, which has become very complacent and they almost all have state-issued media.
Yeah, wow. I mean, kind of creates this crisis of trust and legitimacy almost. It's just like this, almost like there's a demand for centralized control and order almost.
Absolutely.
Like,
I want to try to answer in my part because I asked you to clarify the echo chambers and how it affects, if it creates segregation in the human thoughts and in human beings. It collects them in certain categories, and for what purpose? I would say there are two objective goals. If I were to assume logically, why do people use information? Information is one, mathematical, two, behavioral or ideological. I call it ideological is better probably. Mathematical, it means a goal of formation's objective is to affect a number. So,
qualitative.
Quantity. So it's about number, meaning money.
Or quantitative, yeah.
Meaning votes, meaning public opinion, meaning support, disapproval, or approval. All these are information that is mathematical in somehow. And ideological information, I believe, it's philosophical by nature in its beginning. Then it becomes, before philosophical, metaphysical, and after that, positivistic, meaning it's a scientist. It's a science, it's a knowledge that we call the actual knowledge, meaning the actual science that we learn in school. And I do believe the primary nature and the secondary nature of both types of information, whether the ideological information that we receive or the or instructive information or the mathematical information, has to do with money in the world and with the human act that we anticipate we want in this world. So I do believe there are engineers in the world who affect in a great way how the human beings produce numbers and how the human beings join certain thought process or an opinion. And in this way, the role of us, or the role of the universities, the role of academia, the role of the critical knowledge, the role of the conscience of the human being, the role of wisdom of the human being, and to always say, okay, you want to take me that much in my pocket and that much in my brain or that much in my body, that much in my behavior, I'm going to give you that much here, that much here, that much here. There will be always a surprise factor that the human being can play because, thank God, due to our freedom, right? Due to our, the freedom is a concept that even affected God in heaven. You know, we when he loved us so much freely, we kind of disobeyed him freely. We did something wrong. So I do believe freedom added to the wisdom and the good formation in the academia will make us be in the balance between whoever is trying to sway us, unless we fall into the slavery that Dr. Dunraven just concluded with. And that's a very dangerous form of being, which in the United States we're not far. I think, I do not want to be conspiratory, but we're not far from losing our freedom of critically thinking.
Oh, so we've lost it. It's gone. And
you're worse than me.
I am very skeptical about this, but I'm looking around academia. I'm in academia, right? If you want to capture a society, where do you go? You go to how that society is educated, and you determine that. And everything in our society right now is against critical thinking. You've got the media, which uses these algorithms we talked about that sort of like versus like. They give you small little sound bites that give you some sort of emotional investment. You click on it, your friends are looking at it. You have a attention span of a gnat anyway. Yeah. So you like it, you see what your friends are liking, you get a very quick message.
And
that's all
long,
you think about.
Way too long. Give me a 30-second clip.
Correct. Yeah. People only read the headlines. They read the captions under pictures. That's about it. And then you go to class, and what do you get there? Do you get critical thinking there? No. You get a solid drumbeat of what you are supposed to be thinking from every single one of your professors. And there's no questioning to it at all. Whereas how should you be looking at this media if you were trying to be using critical thinking? You should be, as you put it, you should be looking at things that you agree with as well as that you don't agree with. Yeah. You should seek out the opposite point of view. Right there, you've already exceeded people's attention spans. Once you've read it, you should be asking, why is this story being published? What's the intent? Who's behind it? Who benefits? Know where people sit to see where they stand. And then once the story is issued, does it even make sense? We have all kinds of stories. For instance, you remember when they said that Assad was gassing his own people. Right. When he was winning the civil war. Why would anyone gas their own people when they're winning the civil war and invite Western intervention in? It took months before the Western media admitted, oh, no, it wasn't actually Assad. It was the rebels who were gassing their own people to try to bring in Western intervention. Actually. It was the most ridiculous story. But if anyone had actually sat there and thought about it, why would this happen? Who's standing to gain? But no one has the attention span for that, and no one has the interest.
And you know what I also think? I think a lot of the blame has to do with our shift in education modeling. I mean, one thing I see is mass credentialing and college for all signaling. Like, college is for everybody. Please come and join. And it plays into this market logic of student is a customer model. It's huge.
Student is a customer. Student is not a customer. If the student was a customer, we might actually give them something quality. The student is a money bag. And the money comes from the federal government.
Yeah.
The federal government is willing to throw money at anyone. The money then, because these students are like 18, 19, 20, they know absolutely nothing, but they're given a easily accessible loan. They can then give that loan to colleges who set up their existence as 4-year resorts, more than learning institutions. I mean, my alma mater at the University of Colorado Boulder, it is the prettiest you can get outside of Florence, Italy, and there's all kinds of recreational materials and everything else you could possibly want there. I think the average span is now 7 years instead of 4.
Yeah.
So you can go and spend a fortune there. Nobody
Lord.
thinks about it. They just continue to take in money. They tell the faculty to continue passing people along.
Yeah.
Rigor is gone. Grade inflation is out of control. Are we actually offering anything to our customers, the students? No, and they're not demanding anything because of the federal student loans.
Yeah.
But-
And I mean, actually, to that, you did mention something about how past being money bags, like, we've definitely gotten to that point. But viewing it from that customer perspective, how has that customer mindset changed grading and expectations? Because we've talked about this a little bit. I know that you just briefly now mentioned it, but to what you've described to me off air, it's been pretty extreme, especially online classes.
There was a professor at Harvard, Harvey C- Menfield, and he was one of the last holdouts at an Ivy League university that would give people C's. C is supposed to be average, right? So your average student should receive a C.
Yeah.
He was doing this, and he got all kinds of terrible feedback from the students who said that he was destroying their graduate applications, and he got pressure from the faculty and administration. Finally, he caved, and he now gives 2 grades. He gives one that is reported on the transcript that is inflated, and he gives one in paper form to the students that says, here's what you would actually get if we still had standards. And it's substantially lower. But that is true with most of my fellows. I practice law, and so that's where most of my money comes from. I don't need the academic position. I teach because I can't stand the direction the world is going, and I can't stand the idea that I have to fire most of these people when they come into my office.
You are allowed to teach because you want to, not because you have to.
Right.
To make money.
And so no one's going to intimidate me into grade inflation. But my colleagues who are dependent on getting tenure or being rehired, and they are dependent on the academic income for their existence, they all tell me that there's an incredible pressure from the administration. Pass people along. Don't impose a great deal of rigor. You want them to show up, you want them to turn in a few things, but you really don't want to impose a great deal of rigor. That could prove impossible.
How do you keep rigor when incentives reward satisfaction?
You don't, which is why we see such massive incompetency everywhere, and why it's becoming epidemic now in the age of AI, where I don't think most of these people we're currently graduating have a chance of competing with AI.
Yeah, especially when everything is test-centered.
I like to interrupt a little bit because
Absolutely.
to clarify what you're talking about in terms of academia, education, and students, I wanna launch a statement. I wanna make a statement. Students in America are the most powerful block. The most powerful block that could affect life, could affect everything in the world. Not only in the United States. American students are very important beyond the borders and the boundaries and beyond the United States.
Absolutely.
There is no question. I mean, I like the ministry. Sometimes I followed the Turner Point USA. I used to know Charlie Kirk. Dr. Dunraven knew him in his early days as well. Since 2017, I believe. We met a couple times in certain conferences. Many other institutions like this and ministries, I believe, trying to affect the students and probably bringing them back to the normality of being, to a good behavior, to a good balance between anthropological character, critical thinking, and religious character, national character, patriotic character, common despite diversities. They try, I believe, to create a forum of conversation, because I think Charlie Kirk, God rest his soul, knew that the most important house of power in the United States is not in Washington, D.C., is on campuses in every university in America. Yeah. And it will affect the whole world. The second point I want to make, with that, we have to look at the academia by nature of definition. See, when the academia with Pépé Le Bref, with Charlemagne, I believe, came as a form, as a place, a geographical place, right? As an establishment, as a campus in the 9th century. that he created was to fight against ignorance, to create harmony in society, to develop the nation into unity. The more united human beings we make, and the more we can promote the principles of democracy, the principles of freedom, the principles of ethical behavior. So there was kind of like a balance. Academia is a place where you create really a balance between the anthropocentric view of a humanity, the ethical views of a humanity, the religious views of a humanity, and of course the scientific views of a humanity, because you do need those pillars in order to grow a society fully and to serve the law and order, because there was no law. I mean, the Roman Empire had fallen apart. Europe was fighting in small principalities. You needed a form of a law that makes a human beings trust a justice system. So the academia actually helped in many fields. That form of academia was a scholastic academia. You went for the excellence. You needed to be the best. You needed to be the most excellent. You needed to be the most obviously studioso student, as we say in Italian. Today, the academia is a priori academia. It's no longer a scholastic academia. A priori meaning it comes with an ideology. This university believes in this, that university believes in that, or they have hidden or declared agenda, and they come and they form the students on their agenda. So it's no longer a scholastic knowledge that you're taking.
Oh, we have so many good examples here in Colorado.
Yes.
During COVID-19, CSU had some policies that were a little bit off. It was basically, one big one was if you misgendered anybody, and this isn't a political statement of whatever you want to be, you can be, but if you misgendered somebody once, they had the right to write you up for expulsion. It wasn't a correction. There was no room for correction. It wasn't like, oh, my mistake.
Major free speech issue.
Major issue, and a lot of students were not too happy about that. But I think another big one is, I think Boulder as a campus is a very good example of an echo chamber. I have a friend up there. He's in the Leeds School of Business, and he was saying, like, when Charlie Kirk got shot, one girl was basically screaming with joy, is how we'll put it. And
Just one?
Yeah,
that's the point.
The last time I
that's
checked
the
at
point.
Boulder, they had exactly 2 Republican professors.
And well, the point is, like, I'm a big advocate for free speech. I think everybody should have their opinion. Whether it agrees with mine or not, that is totally fine. But that mindset isn't held up on that campus, which I think is the bigger issue, where it's like, it's fine if you want to scream and holler to somebody's death. Good for you. You're not, I don't want anything to do with you because I feel like that's a little bit morbid. But that premise of then you can act like you can factually back that, that's where I have issues. It's like, no, you can have an opinion that's based in feeling, sure, but there's nothing factually backing his death of like, oh, well, this is great. No.
Most students in university today, we have found consistently, and you can check the Pew Forum for verification on this, most students today cannot distinguish between fact and opinion.
Oh, 100%. I wrote this paper for Met Media, and it became a little bit infamous among some of them. It was going over Charlie Kirk's impact, and everybody focused on Charlie Kirk. When that wasn't the point of the paper. The point of the paper was, and it was very clearly stated in the subtitle, was, the heading was, let's start here, the heading was, how do we continue Charlie Kirk's work? Everybody took that as, how do we continue being where we're all Christian, where we're all conservative? That wasn't the point. Changing your principles, your political principles, so that they are not like foundationally based in your emotions, but your foundation is your political principles, and your emotions can be like founded off of those principles. And what that means is that rather than, oh, I feel this way, that's why I believe this. It's because I believe these things, this is why I feel this way. And it structures debates more so that it's not, oh my God, you're a fascist Nazi because you believe this. Well, that's how you feel, but there's nothing factually there. Versus, well, you believe this, and while I don't agree with it, I don't agree with that because of these things. There's such a change in tonality now when you debate. And from what I've heard from neighbors and people that are much older than me, it used to be like that a little bit more, like 1990, 1980s-ish.
You're describing the difference between inductive and deductive reasoning. And yes, when you have inductive reasoning, you start with a conclusion based on your feelings or how you want, and you find everything else to justify it. That is how almost everything today in academia is used, and you can call that critical theory, you can call it critical queer theory, you can call it critical race theory, you can call it critical feminist theory. It all amounts to inductive reasoning. The traditional way of analyzing anything in the scholastic tradition is deductive reasoning, where you look at the facts and you see where they lead you.
Would you say this is like the most important media literacy skill that people should learn?
That with the scientific method, which nobody knows either. Yes, but again,
it depends on who's paying them, right? Depends on the sponsor.
There you go.
You cannot, when you speak about those things, not bring up the mathematical equation. There is somebody behind that, so they speak this way. Things are motivated by money, by income.
Yes.
Oh, absolutely. One big study that was done was who's most responsible for political violence. That case study that's in Google Scholar, I mean, like you could search this up on Google Scholar, you'll find multiple papers on it. It says mostly conservatives. My biggest question is, okay, how are we defining political violence? Because me and Dunraven, we've talked about the difference between political violence and political oppression, one being one's historical and has a basis, one doesn't. But the big thing was, who's also backing that? Who's funding that study? Like,
and what's the methodology?
How are you pulling data? Are you going to a liberal party, like a liberal-based party, or are you going to a conservative party? Or are you just finding random people on the streets? How is this data being collected? Nobody questions that anymore.
You know, last week in my Irrevocable podcast with Father Andre, which we do weekly, and I would love to have you on it as well with Dr. Dunraven.
Thank you for the compliment.
I hosted Mother Miriam, traditional nun from Texas, and we spoke a little bit about detoxification. You know how you detox your body when your body is inflamed.
Like technological detox, or
detox? Like we spoke about spiritual detox. Believe it or not, we said we came to a place where we said today you cannot talk to a human being because they are intoxicated. Usually when like the cameraman, the gentleman who's been standing with us in the room, or a producer, behind the window, or you or me, sometimes when you meet people, you say simple hi. It doesn't go in as a simple hi. It goes in and it meets with toxics. In the past, it used to meet with simplicity. It used to meet with the gratitude. It used to meet with a human being that is living a normal being. I think today we have a high level of toxicity in society, that our words are not met with the right host. It's almost unfortunately there is a virus, anthropological virus, now that we have to pay attention to. Even when we speak now, I can't believe it how many people will be critical of what we're saying, thinking, oh, what did they say? What did they say? We actually said everything that is good for everybody. We said something that builds up. We said something that brings people together. We think that's something that could free people from slavery, right? We said something actually nice. Imagine against that you will have people standing and raising up in arms and saying, oh, they said something. They must have said something bad. And I don't think so. So we have to little bit pay attention to the toxicity that is in society. And my recommendation is to look at the Gospel of Matthew chapter 5 and the Beatitude, where in one verse Jesus tells us, blessed are the pure of hearts, for they shall see God. I think the purity in the students' hearts need to be addressed. I wonder if the students on campuses in America, after the hippies, after the revolutions of the 60s and the 70s and the 80s and the social justice, and today the sexual revolution, do they have a crisis of purity of heart? Not necessarily the purity of the body, because that's something up to every
Purpose.
human being.
Purity of purpose.
Purity of purpose. Like, do they have purity of purpose? I think the more we find those students, and that's what I believe Charlie Kirk ended up trying to find. I think Charlie Kirk went to universities as an influencer, but then universities and the students affected him positively, converted him a little bit more, clarified his purpose, and he became almost an evangelist to many of the students. Students who are looking for purpose, they need a pure way to find the way so they can identify, live, pursue that purpose. Is there on campuses a mechanism, a venue that allows the students to meet again with their pure purposes?
No.
No.
We
And
actively
that's
teach
both
that there is
personal
no
and-
truth.
That's both a personal issue and it's a groupthink issue. Really, I mean, like a tribal issue too. Which, to that point, I mean, I think one big thing is people using moral language is a shortcut for identifying their allies and enemies. I think that's kind of like ties really well into it, where you're replacing argument with, what would it be pronounced? Condemnation? Like condemning someone? So I guess, like, how do moral claims become loyalty tests, you know?
So there are, I think you have to ask, Father Andre is correct in asserting the power of the youth and in education. So how did education become so corrupted? How did it get to the point where, as you say, there are these moral tests rather than actual thinking? And who's motivating this? Well, there's same people that we stated earlier, communist type of mentality, those who don't want personal responsibility, those who seek power, who want a uniform way of looking at the world, have managed to capture academia and to preach a monolithic view of almost everything that says you are responsible for almost nothing, and that the only acceptable way of dealing with anything is to abdicate all responsibility and all power onto the state, who will then redistribute everything as they see fit. There's an awful lot of wealthy people who feel very guilty about their wealth, who subscribe to this. An awful lot of others who make a lot of money on this in doing so, in these genuflections and these moral signals that they can control and they can influence. And it's not going to stop. It's not going to stop until people retake that responsibility and freedom. And the only way that I think to do that is to look at what's causing it. And as I said, what has turned students from customers of academia into just bags of money to be used is the federal student loans. Do away with those, make money a little more difficult to come by, and what will you see happen overnight? Well, overnight you would see tuition rates at every university drop at least in half, if not more, because right now nobody asks about the price. But if the federal student loan money is no longer flowing, suddenly students are going to be like, well, I can't afford that sort of fortune to fork over for a 4-year resort.
And it forces prices to lower.
It forces prices to lower. It also forces people to come off their ideological platforms and say, well, what am I actually going to get from this? If I have to spend my own money, if I have to work through this, what am I actually getting? Is there any actual standard that you are offering me? And suddenly these institutions that have no standards all over the country are going to have very competing, rigorous standards of saying, yes, we can offer you this. And you might actually get people paying attention to what they're learning, what they're getting, and how that's reflected in the market, how that's reflected in society itself. But as long as the federal government is deciding to print money and throw it at academia and force everyone into it or encourage everyone into it, you're going to see this bloated, awful, wasteful, ideological sort of hellscape of what modern academia is.
Yeah, and I think another big note to add to that is, how do people keep, somebody else has thought of this, maybe another student, probably a student way brighter than me. I think the big conclusion is that there's also a sense of social punishment regime where There's a public punishment that's given that enforces conformity, that maintains this structure, as you said, where it's reducing honest discourse and accelerating institutional drift. But furthermore, I mean, you could also tie that point into why people, like when you ask why people can't get together collectively on campus, that's another big reason. You're a fascist. You're a liberal. It's these insults also play into this conformity measure. And then when there's a public entity saying stuff like this that further enforces it, you can't get away from a federal loan, or you can't get towards moderates in our political spectrum, and you can't get towards people getting along.
No.
So you're saying that the moral claims of the students are affected by the actual loan, are affected by...
The loan allows all the other problems to continue.
What happens to the parents of the students? What happened to the personal upbringing of the students? Are the students like just like copy paste? Don't they have like a personal action or opinion or reaction? Are the students totally absent as a human beings, as a person? Like, is it easy to just allocate them and, like, assemble them in...
There is a great, I think...
That's shocking for me, actually, to...
I'd be interested in what Maddox said about this, but I've noticed in my classes there's a great hunger for real rigor and challenge and some individual motivation that way, but it's not very common.
Yes and no.
They don't see it so often that they don't engage with it. And many of them have learned that they don't need it, so they can just take the easy route and coast through academia and drop any class like mine that might offer anything more than that, because it's just easier to sit through and wait until you get a degree. But that is what we're encouraging, that sort of lack of thinking, lack of individual identity. And what he said is absolutely right. When everything is coming from one point of view, you just go along with the groupthink.
But the solution should be easy. I mean, a student should think critically, and this will help him or help her sort facts. A student should reason morally, and this will help him or will help her sort opinions. And in such a way, a student will come to a formed opinion, basically, and that would be the moral claim of the student. The more they think critically by sorting facts, and the more they observe things and sort them in accordance to, they reason in an ethical and in a moral way. But I guess what you're telling me, that there is no moral way anymore on campuses.
And I'll start here.
Or it's hard to find it.
Yeah, I'll start here with answering it. Personally, what I've seen is there is a sense of rigor, or a sense of seeking rigor. But there's a requirement for when you seek it. If the teacher is not on topic, the teacher's just... I had one teacher who decided how to start, like, basically, how do you become an entrepreneur? Like, how do you form these ideas? That sounds like a great class to learn how to critically think on a deeper level. She had us meditate for an hour in one class. By the way, great, not for this class. I just spent $1,000 on this class, and you just had me meditate for an hour? Why do I care to pay attention? You don't have the rigor to teach and showcase your passion. I don't have the rigor to follow through and, like, pay attention as much as you want me to. You can't demand without demanding it of yourself. But within the same vein, when a professor comes along like you, where you have this rigor and passion where you can display that and you can demand it because you demand it of yourself. Or in this one class, he doesn't do test-based grading. He does it, I want you to do your best. And he gives great grades, and I know my work isn't perfect, but I actually now want to read his notes to know why I did wrong. I'll get 100% on it. I did not I didn't do the work for 100% in the sense of, like, I put in all my effort, but it wasn't like I understood everything. But now I had an incentive to go back and actually learn it. And I think that's awesome. But furthermore, kind of now diving into your afterthoughts, it really goes back to media literacy. It really starts with the individual. There's this educational and workplace effect where signaling replaces competence, right? And checklists replace judgment, and innovation slows. You say students are especially American students, and I agree with you, they can run the world. But without the tools, the interpersonal tools developed, they can't do this. So are organizations selecting for judgment for compliance? Like, how often does follow policy substitute for thinking? Kind of like what you're saying. Like, a couple years ago, you couldn't have an opinion on campus. And it's still like that in a lot of places now. What is the cost of weakened reasoning at work?
Well, I think he distinguished it in that back in when we were still using critical thinking, you couldn't have an opinion until you learned how to back it, which is how a few of us still try to do. But opinions are given in classes more than anything else these days. Here's the right way to think. Here's the right opinion to have, as opposed to saying, well, here's what I think about it, and here's my reasoning for it. We have removed, and I think every single campus here on the Aurora campus, or every single college here on the Aurora campus, as well as at CU, we have removed methodology as a requirement at the undergraduate level from every single undergraduate degree that I know of. Why would we do so? If we actually wanted someone to think critically. Colleges are really more of a signaling function. And to talk about work, yeah, I think most of my business clients have figured out that college indicates nothing about knowledge. It's really annoying, in fact. Most of my clients are board members or CEOs. It's really annoying to all of us when a new hire comes and says, oh, well, I was, to use your example, a finance major, so I know about all these things. No, you know nothing. Your degree means that you spent 4 years following somebody's orders. You jumped through enough hoops to get the requisite things to graduate. That graduation indicates that you can be told what to do occasionally, and we might find it worthwhile to train you how to do what we want you to do.
For the people who are watching us, and especially students, I like to ask clarification. Are we talking about the life in the academia, or are we talking about the scholastics in the academia, the actual curriculum? Are we saying
both?
Wow.
It's really,
even on a paper. Do students write papers? Like, do they write papers?
Mostly not anymore, and they're certainly not substantial.
Because that's
they're
the
not
best
backed
place
by
for
anything.
students.
They're not cited.
I did my first 2 years for Gen Ed. Gen Ed is when I wrote most of my papers. Afterwards,
How cited were they?
how cited? Actually, my Gen Ed at Arapahoe Community College, there I did have to do sourcing. And I still upkeep to that, but there are some papers now where it's like they don't even care about sourcing. They just want you to write a summary.
Mm-hmm.
And sometimes it makes sense why they don't want full sourcing, because the sourcing comes from, they want you to submit like multiple documents through Canvas, which is what we use. And pretty much what you're sourcing is the other attachments you submit. So it makes sense. But in other situations, it's like they don't even care. It's not
Most
part
of the undergraduates I have encountered that can produce a works cited page, and that's it. The idea of using a pinpoint page reference, of taking specific citations.
Oh, you're the only
that's gone.
person. You're the only person that's ever done that.
Right. See, it's just gone.
And
It's not there.
I've my junior year, I just asked my professors. I was like, "Hey, can I just do it Blue Book style?" And they're like, "What is that?" And I was like, "You know where they cite at the bottom of the page, page by page?" "Yeah, please do that." Great.
I encourage the students to write again. The reflection, the relationship between the brain and the writing is very different than between the brain and the speech, like the actual word.
Almost all of them now are using ChatGPT to produce almost anything. And that's what's really tragic, because if all you can do is ask a minimal question to AI, what value added are you? You're nothing. If someone else can ask a better question for a more substantial answer.
Well, I guess this all goes back to what do the students want to achieve when they graduate? Like, in the past, they wanted to go out and have good job, marry, have children, have good housing, and progress in society, and of course be active members in building our society, like building the nation, basically. I wonder what would be today the objective of students from the academia? Why do they want to go through 4-year college? What do they want to achieve? Is marriage is it still the dream? Is family still is the dream? Is the prosperity, is it still the dream? Growing their community, whether a church or whatever social group they are in, are these still dreams for students, or they have different aspirations?
I think that's a better question for people who go to a typical 4-year university. This is a commuter school. So a lot of kids that come here transferred, or they're 40, or they're in their 30s, pretty far along in life. Yeah, they work. And so it's more of, I either want to go back and learn, at least here, or I wanted to see if I could do more in life. For typical universities, from my understanding, you'll get more ambitious kids where it's like dream high, dreaming higher than their work ethic, or if they don't have the work ethic. Not saying who does this or how many people do it, but some of the people that have cheated, at least in the class that I've TA'd for, I mean, you've told me stories, they won't even get rid of the message at the bottom saying from ChatGPT, where it's like, would you like me to change this, or would you like me to add this? And it's when you lack that much work ethic where you can't even put a work ethic into cheating, that's insane. But you still want to work at Lockheed Martin, or you still want to go work at Goldman Sachs. Are you kidding?
I think, to answer your question, most of the students I have seen over the years, they come to college because they think that this is a career path, that they have to do this, they have to check this box in order to go get a job. And they have very unrealistic expectations of what it means to then go get a job. They think they're going to be fast-tracked to the executive C-suite right away. There's very little comprehension there. But what is the true purpose of education and understanding the civics of society to build a society, as you're talking about, that's absent. There's only that signaling function left. And I think that's what academia itself envisions people to. I think most of the faculty sees ourselves as social engineers designing a more perfect Big Brother type of society.
Wow.
Yeah. So I guess as we start to wrap up, there is one thing that I think that we should leave viewers left with, as long as they're not hung up on talking about Charlie Kirk or anything like that, and they actually got a point out of this, is how can they build towards this goal if it's something they want? Because, as I said, there is a lot of out-group hostility and an increase in dehumanization going on.
Courage.
So how do people go back?
Students
Because it
have
can't
to
just be courage. It has to be able to listen too.
Students, first of all, they have to have a virtue in courage. You have to have, in that courage, and of course, the ability of listening, the ability of being a student. I mean, I go usually and I learn my nature as a student, and I say, I'm not informed. I'm here to be informed. But in a methodology in which I am being informed, I want to accomplish while I'm paying money to go on campus is why I am here to be. I am here to be a student. I'm not here to be, part of a liberal movement or conservative movement or be informed politically. I mean, you have to go back to minimize a little bit the tasks that you bring on your shoulders, remove a little bit of the yokes that are unnecessary, do a house clean. Go back to why did you come on this campus? As Dr. Dunraven was saying, many of them come to pursue back their career because it's good. I like this goal. There is nothing wrong with that. Stick with that. That's one. Now, when it comes to the academic life, of course, use your critical thinking. Of course, read a lot, write a lot. I would recommend that students, we were not allowed in our days because computer was the new thing. We were not allowed to use computer. We were not allowed to type our paper, by the way. We had to submit our paper still in handwritten paper. And there is a reason why they did that, because there is a sense of harmony in the thoughts that come between that moment in which you're thinking an idea and you're actually writing it down on a piece of paper. I think those scholastic, traditional, classical ways of thinking, we still need them on campuses. And how do students go back to that?
Can I ask a question on that?
Yes, yes.
So what incentive changes would shift truth-seeking behavior? Like, as you say, reversal requires, restoring competence. Credibility is a big one, and shared rules for evidence. Plus, habits that rebuild attention and humility. Because, you've covered some of that so far, but that being said,
Well, the simplest form will be you learn again deduction versus induction. You learn again to be an observer. It's so beautiful, and people today don't observe things anymore. They don't deduce reality and truth based on the structure. They're not aware of their surrounding, and I think this is what's wrong with the student. I'm not here to criticize. That's the first time. I love to be on campus and to be engaged with the students, because it's important for me personally as well to be observant again of the realities the way they are put together around us and why there is harmony. I think students have to make a very simple decision, and that is, on campus, I am like a driver behind the wheel. When I drive, there are rules to obey. Whether you're liberal or conservative, in your driving, you have to follow the rule of driving, because if you drive like a liberal, you might end up in a big problem on a highway. If you drive like a conservative, you might end up with a big problem on a highway. On campus, I think the matter of opinion should go away, and the matter of
matter of difference of opinion. You mean.
Yes, difference of opinion should go away, and it should be replaced by a matter of desire to acquire knowledge for the sake of truth, for the sake of a better behavior, for the sake of prosperity, for the sake of pleasing God and building the nation. Have a principle of light in you, a rule of life. I call it a rule of life. Students should graduate and spend their days on campus to say, today I achieved more towards my regola di vita. What is the rule of life you want for yourself in the future? If students are coming and they're not thinking that at least I want to leave my campus and graduate with a rule of life, I think they missed life.
Yeah,
I agree with that. I think I stated earlier, policy-wise, do away with the federal student loans. You'll see an instant change. For an individual, however, who wants to improve themselves, who wants to experience critical thinking, who wants to have some of these experiences, Father Andre is absolutely right. Read and write constantly. And now that we have AIs, I'll be interested to see how long this takes to totally transform academia. But now that we have very good AIs, you can ask the AIs, what does it take to form a classical education? Just start reading those lists. And nothing is going to help you more than that constant reading and writing and engaging. And it'll be interesting to see how long academia in its current form even lasts now that that is available. Yeah. And that sort of guide can walk you through, as long as you are asking to have a classic education, as opposed to narrow tailoring for how do I do thus and so.
And if you're going to use AI, because it's right there, use it as a companion, not as you.
Right.
And final question, because we are giving the guideline, but it might be overwhelming. And I know you've been through law school. You've had to manage time on a level I've seen go past anybody else in my life. So what does a sane information diet look like for a normal person?
Don't ask me ever what constitutes normal. I am not. I am on every level. Like, I have 3 degrees. I am an internationally practicing attorney. I scored in the top 1% of people applying for law schools. And my own practices and work is, as you say, fanatical about how I seek and pursue information. And I think everyone who knows me would say I am an example only of what is strange.
Then let's put it this way. If you only had 12 hours in a day to do everything you wanted to do, how would you do it? And then let's lower that down to 6 hours, because then at least you're forced into that position to give that answer.
You do what you have to do first. And then in your leisure, you make sure that you are spending at least a substantial portion of it finding ways to better yourself. And if you think of your essential job is not only completing what you have to do, but finding a way to find a better position than most of your leisure is going. And that's what it should be, right? People say, well, when am I supposed to relax? If your relaxation cannot find a way to better yourself, you're failing as a human being.
Yeah. I mean, and this is also coming from somebody, I mean, you've said you play video games. It's not the best use of time, but you're also reading. You're also learning. You're also
Facing more questions.
Running. And that's also, by the way, a great example. Going to the gym is a great example of bettering yourself if you're trying to think of, like, how to compare this to something. So
body, mind, spirit. Yes.
Yeah, body, mind, spirit. Just focus on those three things, and you should be good. Thank you again for coming. This was with Father Andre and Dr. Julian Dunraven. Very happy to bring you guys on for the first episode.
Thank you.
Thank you.